And a very good morning to you. How are you? It's 11 a.m. this Sunday morning, the 10th of June 2018. It's another glorious one in Manchester and South Manchester. Wonderful weather we've been having in the city of late. I hope you've had a good weekend. I hope you're in good form this Sunday morning. You've gone to Kettle On. Sunday View, going to take a look at the front pages of the UK's broadsheet newspapers, mostly. A lot of Love Island nonsense in the tabloids. We don't want to talk about any of that. You can join in as usual. As usual, if there's something you want to mention, do it through Twitter. It's at Richie Allen Show. Any comment you want to make. You might want to change the direction of the discussion. If there might be something I don't mention, you might want to let me know. So do it through Twitter at Richie Allen Show. Sunday then, Sunday View. Good to be with you. Let's get on with it.
Asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
Oh yeah, it is a warm one. I'm not chancing leaving the windows of the studio open this Sunday though, like I did last week. Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, triggerwarning.tv and richieallen.co.uk. This is Sunday View. Thanks for joining me.
It's the Richie Allen Show, broadcasting live on richieallen.co.uk and multiple platforms around the world. And now, here's your host, Richie Allen.
To be honest with you, I thought I might be a couple of minutes late. I just made it by the skin of my teeth. I was editing right up till 11 o'clock. I don't like to be late, because I get up so early. I think you've got plenty of time, Alan. But then I run into roadblocks. Anyway, lots of tweets already about various things. Thanks for them. Let's just get rid of the theme music. Let's get rid of that there. A couple of people asking me about marches in London yesterday for Tommy Robinson, Stephen, Christopher, Yaxley, Lennon, whatever his name is. Are you interested in that, Richie? Are you going to cover it? No, I'm not. I'm not interested in it at all. What I would say is, try and be a little bit objective for once in your life. And I'm speaking to those people who unapologetically, unashamedly, almost, I wouldn't say psychotically. That wouldn't be, there's no such word. That wouldn't be fair either. But fanatically follow people like Stephen, Christopher, Yaxley, whatever his name is, Lennon. Look at some of the scum that were in London yesterday and ask yourself, though you live in a fascist dictatorship, which you do you want to replace it with some of that vermin that were carrying on in London yesterday? That's all I'm going to say. Cue the abuse. But I couldn't care less. I've got skin that's thicker than a rhinoceros. Doesn't bother me. It's like water off a duck's back. So no, I'm not interested in that story, but there you go. I've had my say, haven't I? Wonderful. Right. Before we look at the front pages of the papers, let me read you this from Daniel Hannan, writing in today's Sunday Telegraph. Daniel Hannan. He writes, George Soros is too late. Just as the Hungarian-American financier launches his multi-million-pound campaign for a second EU vote, Brussels has moved on. Eurocrats, writes Daniel Hannan, they no longer talk, even in private, about reversing Brexit. It's not that they have suddenly started to respect the will of the people. Rather, it's that they have found what they see as an even better option. What could be better than a humiliated Britain begging to reverse its decision? Why? A humiliated Britain that remains in the EU without votes or a veto. Hannan continues, the United Kingdom is inching toward an open-ended transition period that will leave almost everything as it is. Brussels will continue to run our agriculture, our fisheries, our overseas trade, our employment laws. We shall continue to pump our squillions across the channel. Our laws will remain subject to Euro judges. Only one significant thing will change. We shall lose our representation in the EU institutions and, with it, our ability to block harmful new laws. Why is Britain, writes Daniel Hannan in the Sunday Telegraph, why is Britain, the world's fifth economy and fourth military power, contemplating a form of thraldom that none of the EU's other neighbours, not Albania, Ukraine, never mind Norway, would dream of accepting. Is it sheer ineptness, or do some of our officials actively want it? Part of the problem, he says, is that Parliament has never truly accepted the referendum result. While MPs and peers have the right, the duty, indeed, to seek the best possible outcome, that is not what all of them are doing. Labour's current position, pro-customs union, anti-single market, represents the worst of all worlds. As recently as February, the party's leaders were explaining how crazy it would be to stay in the customs union with no say. For Jeremy Corbyn, though, the question is not in or out of the customs union, it is in or out of office. Because if voting for a nonsensical proposition might hasten an early election, he will do it. Extraordinary stuff in the Sunday Telegraph by Daniel Hannan today. European Union unelected bureaucrats no longer want to reverse the decision made by the UK people in 2016. What they want is to humiliate and to destroy and to use Britain as an example to other countries who might think about leaving. We will destroy you. We will keep you as some sort of associate member, but you'll have no representation. In fact, it'll be worse than what you had before you chose to leave. Excellent stuff by Daniel Hannan in the Telegraph today, although a trifle depressing, I would say. 6.5 minutes past 11, Sunday morning, June 10th, 2018. So we'll look at the Sunday Times then. Sorry to say the early part of the programme will be a bit Brexit-centric, but it's important. And outside of Love Island, the newspapers are full of the European Union, UK negotiations and next week's amendments and talks in the House of Parliament. Next week's votes, series of votes all day Tuesday. We'll talk more. You'll hear more about that in a minute. So we'll look at the Sunday Times then. It's a pro-European Union paper, Murdoch's Times. The front page headline is Revealed Brexit Backers' Golden Kremlin Connection. The Times writes that the hidden scale of Kremlin links to the biggest donor to the Brexit campaign are revealed today. And they name Aaron Banks, who helped fund Brexit. He also was a big UKIP donor, of course. He's the millionaire businessman. And apparently, writes the Sunday Times, he was offered a business deal involving 6 Russian gold mines. He also had undisclosed meetings with the Russian ambassador to Britain, who's called Alexander Yakovenko, as we know, because of the Skripal story. So allegedly, Aaron Banks, the pro-leave guy, had undisclosed meetings with the Russian ambassador to Britain. And the Sunday Times says Banks' meetings with the Russian ambassador were actually set up by a suspected Russian spy. None of this is proven by the Sunday Times. It's all allegations. It's all whispers in the night and footsteps and screams. Nothing really of any substance here. The Times, in a monumental bit of hyperbole, writes, the revelations raise explosive questions about attempts by Moscow to influence the referendum result. This is absolute garbage. Kevin Schofield is the editor of PoliticsHome.com. He was on Sky News earlier reviewing the newspapers. What does Kevin Schofield think of the story?
The Sunday Times have been passed a cache of emails which show that both Aaron Banks and his colleague at the end of the picture there, Andy Wigmore, had undisclosed meetings with Russian representatives during the campaign. Now, there's obviously a very strong suspicion that Russia wanted Britain to vote for Brexit and that they were doing their damnedest behind the scenes, essentially, to try and bring about that vote. I mean, this is another... It's more nudge, nudge, wink, wink, I think, than smoking gun. It doesn't really strike me as incontrovertible evidence that the Russians managed to swing the referendum result. And I think that there's a danger for Remainers in particular to think that, we were cheated. It wasn't because of we lost the argument. It's because those Russians tricked us into voting for Brexit. And I'm not sure that that's the case, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't think that the Russians had that much of an influence on why somebody from Barnsley or whatever voted.
Well, there certainly isn't the evidence
to leave.
There's no evidence to influence people.
Myself, I don't feel I was influenced. And I just saw all this today and thought, oh, here we go. More grist to the mill for those who are saying it was an invalid referendum and we'll have to have a second one.
Yeah.
It's really getting quite desperate now. I mean, I don't know what Aaron Banks was doing, liaising with all these Russians, but it's obviously going to be used as ammunition to undermine the progress of Brexiting.
Yeah, and I think, as I say, there's a danger that people that wanted there to be a Remain result just think, well, that's fine, then we were cheated. That explains it, rather than trying to analyse why people were voting to leave.
Yeah, journalism is dead. We do live in a post-fact world, as I've been saying for yonks now. It's absolute garbage. It's gutter journalism by the Times. They've thrown a whole load of innuendos and footsteps in the night allegations against Aaron Banks, but offered nothing of any substance to back up those allegations. But it doesn't matter. In 2018, it doesn't matter a damn. You can say whatever you want about anybody. This is the world we live in now. So it's out there that there's more evidence that the Russians were trying to influence Brexit. It's all over the media today, this story, not just in the Sunday Times. A lot of other lazy newspapers, rather than do their own stories, or at least investigate the Times itself, they've just copied and pasted the Times allegations and bunged them together for a story. Not even any opinion attached to it. Dreadful. You heard Liz Kershaw there, well-known broadcaster. We'll hear from Liz Kershaw again in a minute. So also on the front page of the Times, or in the Times today, very interesting story, very important story. And it backs up what Daniel Hannan wrote in the Sunday Telegraph today. Also in the Times, Theresa May is facing an autumn ambush to try to force Britain to accept freedom of movement after Brexit, as a menacing cabinet split opens up over immigration. Now, a European ambassador has warned the government that the EU negotiator Michel Barnier will put freedom of movement right back on the table at Theresa May's moment of maximum weakness, just before the Conservative Party conference in the autumn. And senior government officials are saying they expect the European Union to demand continued freedom of movement if Britain wants any type of frictionless trade in goods deal with the EU. The Sunday Times goes on to say that there's division over this. Sajid Javid, the new Home Secretary, is against this. He wants freedom of movement to stop, full stop, alleges the Times. But many other ministers in the government are prepared to accept freedom of movement stays as it is in order for some sort of deal. This is dreadful. Here's Liz Kershaw then fairly accurately summing up what I think most folk, at least most folk who get their news from the mainstream media, this is what most folk think about this and freedom of movement.
Front page of the Times, it's Chief EU negotiator Michel Barnier will put freedom of movement back on the table at May's moment of maximum weakness. Blah blah blah.
That was one of the key triggers for people. Yeah.
I don't like the idea of Theresa May being bullied, and I think she is. I think I've still got faith in her that she's playing her cards close to her chest, and she will deliver what the British people, the majority of the British people, voted for. However, if she is blackmailed, allows herself to be blackmailed by Michel Barnier to allow free movements of people across Europe and into the United Kingdom, there'll be massive anger and anarchy, and people will feel betrayed. It will undermine the faith in democracy, because I've always said people aren't racist. They're not anti-immigration per se. Nobody minds. A minority, not 17 million. Nobody minds a Czech doctor coming to work for the NHS or a Polish plumber coming to install your new bathroom. What I think people voted for, and I'm speaking personally as well, and lots of other people, they voted for the idea that somebody who comes from North Africa for economic reasons, as a migrant, not a refugee, lands in Italy, can then go freely without hindrance or barrier through Europe and be admitted, get themselves an EU passport and then be freely admitted into the UK. And we are of no way of stopping that. And I think that's what people overwhelmingly voted for. On the immigration issue, there's all sorts of other issues, economic, etc.
I think free movement played more of a part in the vote than Russia, for instance.
Exactly.
You know, I think that was probably the reason. I think that's the one thing that people will turn around and say, well, I voted Leave because I want to take back control of our, to coin the phrase.
Yes, pretty much. She summed it up brilliantly there. And that's just one way, of course, that people were getting access to this country. The way she described North African migrants not coming from war zones, but getting into southern Europe, getting a passport, and then heading straight to the UK, where, you know, they saw the UK as being pretty favourable to people like them, and saw the health service as being pretty favourable to people like them. And I don't want to demonise these people at all. You know, they wouldn't do it if the opportunity to do it wasn't there. I always say this to people, don't blame them for doing that. You do it yourself, for God's sake. Don't blame them. Blame the system that allows it. And then ask yourself, why does that system allow it? And as I'm talking to you, I'm browsing. There's loads of interest in this story about the Aaron Banks and the Russian meetings and Russia influencing Brexit. I'm sick to death of it. I really am. So I'm going to say something I've said 1,000 times in the last 10 years. There's only one country or government successfully influencing domestic and international policy, foreign policy in this country. And that's the apartheid Rothschild state of Israel. It's the only country. While all this nonsense about Russia and, as I said, footsteps in the night and whispers, nudge, nudge, and all this nonsense, Israel. Right? We never talk about Israel and Israel's influence. You remember Shai Massot? Do you remember him and the brilliant work by Al Jazeera, the Israeli diplomat, boasting about how he could take down UK government ministers, boasting about how he had established several groups, you know, at least one of which was intending to influence Labour Party policy. And he said that while this was going on, they were very, very easily able to obscure this and keep it away from the media. Do you remember that? Eh? There are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of MPs, members of Labour Friends of Israel or Conservative Friends of Israel. There are even more MPs that you don't know who take money from Israel, but you don't know about it. We had Priti Patel, the International Development Secretary, on holiday in Israel, meeting the top brass. Not just in Israel, but also meeting them in New York and not telling her own Prime Minister. I could be here all day. Lord Pollack even, P-O-L-A-K, you never heard of him. A lot of people never heard of him. He's successfully recruited over 80% of Conservative MPs and every single government minister to become members of the Conservative Friends of Israel. That group exists to advance Israel's influence in Britain. Full stop. And if you talk about that, you're called anti-Semitic. The Israelis regard Theresa May as one of Israel's most loyal subjects. Let's not say supporters, let's say what it is, subjects. How did they get away with it? Because nobody talks about it. Nobody in the media. There was a story, though I couldn't find it this morning. I didn't have time. There was a story a couple of years ago, wasn't there? When some of these Prince Charles letters were published, didn't Charles once write about the Jewish lobby in the UK? In fact, he might have written about the Jewish lobby in the United States. And he asked something like, why does nobody have the gumption to stand up to the Jewish lobby in the US? I think he actually wrote those words in a letter, Prince Charles. So don't start with the Russian influence, right? When you have Israel owns this country lock, stock and barrel. So it does. The Mail on Sunday, front page, Brexit news secret Putin connection. Basically, bone idle, lazy journalism from the Mail. They've just basically taken the Sunday Times story. They got wind of the Sunday Times story yesterday, so they splashed it on a front page and basically just repeated what the Sunday Times has said. Aaron Banks, though, the UKIP donor, the big vote leave donor, he's said that this investigation is nothing more than a witch hunt. Banks was once famously pictured in an elevator at Trump Tower, I think, was it, with Farage and Donald Trump himself and another man. 20 minutes past the hour. Sunday Telegraph front page back. May or Corbyn will get in, rebels are told. This is Amber Rudd, the former Home Secretary. The Windrush generation scandal did for Amber. Well, apparently Amber Rudd and Ian Duncan Smith, who are ideologically opposed to one another on the European Union. Smith wants to leave, she wants to stay. Both of them have got together to say that the Prime Minister should be backed this coming week on the votes in the Commons on the EU withdrawal bill. Let's show unity. Long week next week. A very interesting week coming up as well. Going to take a very quick break. 21 minutes past the hour. Sunday View live on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 and triggerwarning.tv. Back in a minute with an interesting interview with one of these unelected lords, these farters and burpers and snorers who snore and fart and burp their way through the House of Lords, and they get £300 a day for doing it. And they're woken up only to vote against the EU withdrawal bill, to subvert the democratic decision made by those who voted to leave. So we'll hear from a lord, from a peer in a minute, and plenty more. Later on in the programme, we're going to talk about that young 21-year-old medic murdered in Israel. We'll talk a little bit about the transgender lobby, and we'll hear from the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad. This is Sunday View.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today. Welcome back to the most listened to independent radio show in Europe. It's your Richie Allen Show.
Welcome back. Keep the tweets coming in. It's at Richie Allen Show on Twitter. Welcome to the programme. David tweets, far out I know. I wonder if the agenda to force different cultures together is also part of the CIA 50-year plan of soft disclosure, as well as what we suspect, says David. Thanks for that, David. Stephen Guinness tweets, Richie, did you know that Keir Starmer is now a member of the Rockefeller-created Trilateral Commission? I did, mate. I came across that info back in November of last year. I don't know how long he's been a member. Of 650 MPs, he's the only one from the House of Commons to be granted membership, says Stephen Guinness, who says he'll be paying more attention to the communications of Starmer. Yes, the Trilateral Commission is a front organisation. It's a round table organisation. Rockefeller created. It is it's a Zionist cabal, basically. It's one of I can't go into it. I'll be here all day going into it. It set up the American Institute of Pacific Relations back in 1925 through the Council on Foreign Relations. It's just another front organisation. What it does is gets Zionist policies on the agendas of political parties right across the West, effectively. America, obviously, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and so on, so on, so on. Most people have never heard of it. Thank you, Stephen. I've given a really, really rough Cliff Notes definition of what the Trilateral Commission is. I'll get into it with Dean Henderson on a programme soon. It's really important to know this stuff if you really want the minute details. So I mentioned unelected lords, the farters, the burpers, the belchers and the screamers. Last week these lords were given, the emissaries were sent to them with notes warning them about their conduct. Stop shouting and screaming and whining and keening and moaning and farting and all of that. That's what they do, these bastards. These are privileged people who are, because of they've donated to parties in the extreme over the years, they get appointed to the House of Lords. Peerages, they're called. And these people then get to vote. These unelected people get to say, when the government tries to get a bill through the House, they can actually say, well, no, you can't, and send it back to them, which is what's happened with the withdrawal bill. So one of these guys, a Lib Dem peer by the name of Lord Newby, don't get me started. He's the leader of the Lib Dems in the House of Lords. Lord Newby was on Sky News earlier with Stephen Dixon. You'll hear Stephen Dixon first.
Yeah, you talk about a second EU referendum. I mean, are you talking a second in-out referendum here, essentially?
Well, the people decided that they wanted to kick off the Brexit process. That's what the government...
I mean, forgive me, Lord Newby, it's a yes or no answer. That are you looking for a second in-out referendum?
We're looking for a referendum which says, is any deal done by the British government better or worse than staying in the EU?
You see, what surprises me about the Lib Dems, in all the years that the Lib Dems have been very, very strong political campaigners, and one thing that you've always pushed for has been proportional representation. You say democracy is sacrosanct. You are the Liberal Democrats. You're saying that the whole democratic process that we went through nearly 2 years ago, is not worth the paper it's written on. You don't believe the British people this time round.
No, what we're saying is that we give the British people more democracy by them having the final say on any Brexit deal.
Did you hear the end of that? You did. Shall I play the last couple of seconds of that again? No, you don't need me to play it again. He actually said, they're giving us more democracy. More democracy! This from a privileged, jumped up little unelected arsehole doing all he can to invalidate the referendum result. More democracy. We'll keep asking you till you give us the answer we want. That's democracy. Yes. Do you want some democracy? Yes, here's some more. Do you want to stay in the European Union or do you want to leave? We want to leave. Okay. Here's some more democracy. Do you want to stay in or do you want to leave? And in the end, you just get so fucking tired of it, you don't say anything at all, and then they just stay in. See Denmark, France, and see Ireland twice. Dixon tries again with Lord Newby.
We had a referendum which said, do the British people want to be out of the EU or in the EU? Do you want to be out of the single market? Do you want to be out of the customs union? Do you want to end free movement of people across Europe? And the British people said, no, we don't want that. And it does seem that everyone who disagrees with that opinion is just now pushing and pushing and pushing to get it revisited.
Well, as you know jolly well, many of the arguments that were advanced in that referendum have proved to be false. Many of the complications, like that of the Northern Ireland border, which were not discussed at all in that referendum, are proving to be absolutely critical. So people now have a lot more information about what the EU, as one of the people in your report, Sophie Ridge's report, just said. It's a lot more complicated than people thought. There are a lot more factors. They ought to have a say on whether they think any deal done by the British government is going to be better for the country than staying in the EU. Yeah, how is that anti-democratic? It's giving the people the final say.
But it's effectively trying to overturn the people's say already. I mean, we don't rerun general elections.
Yes, we do.
Like the result.
We have periodic general elections, and people change their minds.
And we abide by the result.
Yes,
of those
we do.
elections.
But we don't say, "Oh, well, we had a general election in 2017. Let's not have another. Let's have a Tory government in perpetuity," do we? Because in a democracy, people change their mind.
We let it run its course, and people voted to get out, and you want another referendum before we've actually got out, in the basis that we may then stay in.
Yes, good stuff. We haven't even left. They want another referendum. It's brilliant. Tiger has called it amplified democracy on Twitter. Do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? Want to leave. Do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? Want to leave. Do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? Want to leave. Do you want to leave? Do you want to stay? Ah, come on, then we'll stay. Democracy! Good answer. That's what it is, effectively. And they're just driving people mad. I have been doing this programme now since September 2014. So I kind of have an idea. I have a feel for my audience. My audience is tired of this. I know there are people listening to this morning who always listen to Sunday View, and they are tired of it. They're sick of this stuff. Sick of this Brexit stuff, because that was the desired result of all of this bullshit that we've had since the referendum result itself on June 23rd, 2016, whatever it was. This is what it's designed to do. It's designed to make you so sick of it that when there is another referendum, that you can't be bothered, your hairy backside, to go out and vote the way you did back in June of 2016. Amplified democracy is right. Twice in Ireland, once in France, once in Denmark. Over Maastricht, over Lisbon, and over Nice. You said what now? We said no to the Nice Treaty. We'll come back again. And again and again. And they call it democracy. You heard newbie there. It's democracy. Keep asking you till you tell us what we want to hear. Madness, huh? Also in the Sunday Telegraph, speaking of Stephen Christopher Yaxley, whatever his name is, no point in gagging orders if names are online, says top judge. It's not actually about paedophilia. It's not about trials to do with grooming gangs or any of that. It's about anonymity for celebrities. If the public already knows about the case from social media. There was a number of these cases over the last few years involving people like Ryan Giggs, the football player, the former football player, and others who managed to successfully keep their name out of the tabloid newspapers through getting a gagging order enforced by a judge when everybody knew who was being talked about. It was all a bit silly, really. Everybody knew. So Lord Jonathan Mance has basically said that these gagging orders are silly because it's trying to close the stable door after the horse has bolted already. And he said that there's no point in really having these. And that's it, really. It's interesting, I suppose, from the point of view of a discussion about what is in the public interest and what isn't. Now, Ryan Giggs was sleeping with his brother's wife while his brother was in prison, I think. What a lovely man. What an arsehole. But is that in the public interest? I suppose if Ryan Giggs was acting like Owen Jones, the modern latter-day Mary Whitehouse, or if he was acting all prim and proper, and if he was advocating a certain type of lifestyle, a kind of a prurient lifestyle, if he was doing that, then it would be in the public interest. But if he's just a guy who plays football every week, collects his wages and goes home, is it in the public interest that his private life and the life of his brother and his brother's wife is in the tabloids? Is it? I would say, as somebody who's been a journalist for a long time, I would say, no, it isn't really in the public interest. But if newspapers want to do that, well, I wouldn't try and stop them doing it. But I certainly wouldn't be part of any newspaper that would go around printing that sort of rubbish. But it's interesting. And a couple of people have posted this story today saying that it somehow relates to the Tommy Robinson story. It has no relationship to it whatsoever. None. Don't forget, this guy admitted in court. He pled guilty to contempt of court, having been warned about it last year. putting out live streams and quite realistically risking that the jury would see some of that stuff, while he was also trying to film the jury and to film these guys as well. This won't go away in the short term. But 1,000 people apparently turned up yesterday in London. That's not a lot, really. It's not a lot. Shall we move on? Am I really winding people? No, I'm not. I'm not winding people up. It's how I feel. The Sunday Express, May savages Lords over Brexit. Camilla Tominey. Theresa May apparently savaged the unelected peers for trying to block Brexit and vowed not to accept anything that prevents us from taking back control of our money, our laws and our borders. Do you really believe this? That Theresa May has turned into some sort of bulldog? That she's going to take on the European Union? Really? Well, Fraser Nelson writes for The Spectator magazine. He says that the idea Theresa May will take the gloves off and play hardball with the EU is nothing short of nonsense. Fraser Nelson.
Well, that's what Boris Johnson has told us in his leaked tape last Tuesday, that there's going to be a Theresa May playing hardball, there's going to be a meltdown. I'm not quite so sure, though. I mean, the British position seems to get weaker every time it's rejected by the EU, and I think we are heading towards a kind of compromise which most Tory MPs, I think, would actually back, where we would actually stay in the single market for goods, perhaps not services, but it would be something in order just to get this off the political agenda.
You think they would actually swallow staying inside the single market in some respects?
I think there'll be something along those lines.
Fascinating.
Now, I think most Tory MPs would back that, by no means all, but remember, she needs to get this past Parliament. She needs all of her party to back it, because if they don't, then it's no deal.
So in the unsatisfactory jargon of all of this, we are heading towards a soft Brexit.
I don't know if you can call it a soft Brexit, but it certainly will be a Brexit which I suspect would satisfy most of the people who voted for Brexit. But the big question the Tories are grappling with is, would that lead to uproar and us being kicked out of office? David Davis is talking about the worst defeat since 1997 if they were to compromise in that way. They just don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where he gets this idea that most people who voted for Brexit would accept, they would be satisfied with what was proposed. Of course it wouldn't satisfy them to be still in and having to accept the 4 freedoms and all of that. The Sunday Observer, we're going to wrap Brexit up now in a minute. I know we've talked a lot about it, but it is the story of choice in the Sunday newspapers today, and it is serious. It isn't distraction. When we talk about a hidden hand, a cabal, the European Union and political unions developing to the point where sovereignty disappears all over the world, that is the agenda. So we must talk about that. Has to be discussed. Sylvia, good morning. Like it or not. It's very important stuff, this. Very important. The Sunday Observer, more of this nonsense about Aaron Banks. Top Brexit funder had multiple meetings with Russian officials. More lazy bastard journalism by the Observer. They've basically rinsed and flushed and repeated the Sunday Times story. They can't be arsed sourcing stories of their own. Festival of Lies. Keir Starmer was on... do you want to hear a bit of this? Oh, go on. This is the last of it this morning. Keir Starmer is the shadow Brexit secretary. He was on with Andrew Marr today. It is a festival of lies. He tries to maintain, speaking with Marr, that Labour wants to be in the customs union, doesn't want to be in the single market, but wants to have access to the single market. But he says Labour is also committed to ending freedom of movement. Then he completely contradicts himself. And Andrew Marr, who's... Listen to Keir Starmer talking with Andrew Marr.
The amendment that we have put down is one which doesn't tie us to a model that won't work for Britain. The Norway model works for Norway. I can see why people are attracted to it, but it won't work for the United Kingdom. So we've put down one that doesn't tie us to a model, but it does answer the question, should there be a single market deal, by saying, yes, there should, and it needs to go together with the customs union arrangement that we put on the table some months ago.
The trouble with the motion that you've put down is it says you want all those good things, you want frictionless access and jobs and so forth, but you also want an end to free movement. And again, almost everybody with any authority inside the EU, up to and including President Macron of France, has made it crystal clear you can't have that.
Right, good stuff. Andrew Marr, good stuff. Starmer, you're a muppet. You want this and you want that and you want this and a bit of this and a bit of that. But you are told, a million times, you can't have that stuff without accepting freedom of movement and without accepting that the EU will basically control your border. Right? Listen to this from Starmer.
Well, what we say in our amendment is that we recognise there are going to have to be shared regulations and shared institutions. And again, in Northern Ireland, you can't have standards one side of the border that are different to standards the other side of the border. Everybody, I think, knows and understands that. So we're answering that question. On the question of freedom of movement, of course that's going to have to be part of the negotiations. In our manifesto, we made it clear that freedom of movement will end when we leave the EU. The question is what comes next. And we need to spell that out. And it needs to be spelt out against a changing position in Europe.
But you're still saying, basically, we want all the advantages, plus we want no freedom of movement.
Right, good stuff. So Mar reminds him again, you're still saying you want all the advantages, but you want to end freedom of movement. And Starmer, who has already said we want to end freedom of movement, then basically says that we won't be ending freedom of movement. Listen to this.
Freedom of movement.
No, Andrew, the obligations, the obligations of the single market are that you share regulations, you have common standards, and that you have shared institutions.
And you're part of the four
we're
freedoms,
facing up to that.
We
would have to negotiate on the four freedoms, freedom of movement.
We'd have to negotiate now on freedom of movement, says Starmer, who only 60 seconds ago said freedom of movement will end when we leave the European Union. We'll have to negotiate now on freedom of movement, he says.
We need to set out what we want, because this...
But I thought you wanted an end to freedom of movement, Keir Starmer.
Conversation is in a vacuum at the moment. But it's very likely, it seems to me, in the 21st century, that we're going to need an immigration policy.
We're going to need an immigration policy which does what?
It does allow people to cross borders across the UK, across the EU to work. We want people to be able to join their families. We want the best students to come to the UK. So we need to spell out what actually we're asking for.
But he's just spelled it out. Freedom of movement won't end under a Labour government. It's as simple as that. And Andrew Marr, if you catch the programme on BBC iPlayer, doesn't do his job. And jump all over that and say, well, basically you are prepared to give away freedom of movement in order to get access to the single market and the customs union. Another very quick break. When we come back, transgender rights, Israel, and you'll hear from the Syrian president. Not transgender rights in Israel. No, transgender rights, Israel, and the president of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, who was interviewed by the Daily Mail. All very interesting. Sunday View back in 2.
Have you lost access to important data from a computer hard drive, mobile phone, or other storage device? Maybe you have a broken hard drive containing years of information, or a smartphone that no longer works from which you'd like the pictures, movies, and chats recovered. If you would like to recover data from any type of digital device, including desktop and laptop computers, external hard drives, cameras, smartphones, NAS, and RAID servers, then contact Data Clinic today at dataclinic.co.uk now.
Introducing the H2O app, a powerful water structuring application that programs vibrational energies into water through the use of different sound frequencies. Once programmed, the use of water for drinking, cooking, bathing. Give it to your friends and colleagues or spread it around the garden. The list goes on. It's not just water that the app can be used for either. It's great for programming crystals too. The H2O app is free to download and is available on both Android and Apple platforms. For further information, go to h2oapp.online.
There's a place high in the mountains of Spain, a sanctuary where souls gather from all around the globe to learn about themselves and experience powerful changes in the way we see our world. They become awakened to their gifts and their power to heal others. Become part of this ever-growing worldwide family of unique, pure energy healing practitioners. Discover how amazing you truly are. Go to www.markbayerski.com. It could just change your life forever.
The Richie Allen Show relies on your support. Go to richieallen.co.uk and set up a monthly donation today.
Thanks for listening to Sunday View. Healthy listenership too this morning, considering the great weather across the country. I thought I might shed a few listeners and I might get more people catching up on podcast and YouTube later, but healthy old live audience this morning. Thanks for tuning in. Right, a couple of transgender stories of interest to you. This one might just boil your blood. Did I lose it there just momentarily? Did I lose it? No, I've got it. This is in the Mail on Sunday. Sadistic killer who was born a man but sent to a female prison for murder because he identified as a woman, only to be moved for sleeping with inmates, is getting a £20,000 sex change operation paid for by you, the taxpayer. This is a particularly shocking crime, this. I remember this. I was in Spain at the time, but I remember this story. A prisoner serving a life sentence for a brutal murder will have a sex change operation on the NHS, costing 20 grand. Paris Green was really born Peter Lang, but has identified as female since 2011. In 2013, she was jailed for life for killing Robert Shankland. It was a terrible murder. Shankland, God love him, was lured to this transgender person's flat, tied up, tortured for hours, got such a beating that there were footprints on his body. These fucking scumbags sexually assaulted him with a rolling pin. These animals, including this fucking freak, Paris Green, right? So Green began this sentence in a female prison because Green identified as being a woman, but then had to be moved because he, she or it or whatever was having sex with female prisoners. Now, the victim's family are finding out this. They're absolutely livid. That full gender reassignment surgery is going to be paid for by the taxpayer. Green will be transported hundreds of miles to a hospital in England under constant guard. Mr. Shankland's sister, Pauline Bell, said this is outrageous. She shouldn't be getting this operation on the NHS. It isn't life-saving treatment. She took somebody's life away and destroyed a family. Prisoners speaking on condition of anonymity said that Green was notorious for having sex with other women prisoners, adding he didn't seem to be acting much like a woman to me. This is getting a lot of coverage, this, because the Mail on Sunday, among other newspapers, has been reporting a lot recently that prison governors are really worried about moving sex offenders who are born male but identify as female. Actually moving them into women's jails could lead to vulnerable inmates being attacked. Unbelievable. And also in the Mail on Sunday today, but also in other newspapers, the Shadow Home Secretary Diane Abbott has been criticised over attending a fundraiser for an extremist transgender group that wants to give cross-sex hormone drugs to children without any prescription. If the children want them, they should be able to get them. This is Action for Trans Health, which is a very hardline trans group. And this is coming out of this hard left faction Momentum, which is a fascist group. It's a left-wing fascist group working within the Labour Party to get this sort of crazy shit on the agenda, where men who identify as women can take part in female-only election campaigns or races to decide who's going to be a councillor or whatever. They want the NHS to prescribe cross-sex hormones to patients of any age. Excuse me, they will need a prescription, I correct myself there, but of any age. So Dan Abbott has been attending a fundraiser for this group. She denies it today. Interesting stuff. Stephanie Davis from Transgender Trend is alarmed by the growing number of children being allowed to change gender and said, I'm shocked Diane Abbott would support an extremist organisation that pushes for total autonomy for little children to take powerful hormones that can have permanent effects on their bodies. Interesting stuff, isn't it? Very interesting. Not sure if we're going to hear from Bashar al-Assad this morning. What are we, 11 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. I wanted to do this story that Dan Cohen did on RT. I like Dan Cohen. Got some good people at RT. Polly Boyko, good journalist is Polly in London. Dan Cohen, good stuff, doing good stuff RT in certain areas. We all know about Razan al-Najjar now. She was a young 21-year-old medic shot in the chest by an Israeli sniper. Was it early last week or last weekend? Israel said they'd investigate, didn't they? But they very quickly cleared the soldiers. Took them about a day to figure out that, the soldier was innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. But worse than that, Israel put together a pack of lies to smear the dead woman's name. Israel. Here's Dan Cohen for RT. This is what Israel does. Dan Cohen, RT, over the weekend.
21-year-old Razan al-Najjar was treating and evacuating protesters as a volunteer medic in the Gaza Strip on June 1st, when an Israeli sniper shot and killed her. On Wednesday, the Israeli military said it investigated her killing and found that its soldiers didn't deliberately target her. It's a claim few believed, given the Israeli army's highly trained snipers, which it boasted about in this now-deleted tweet. On Thursday, an Israeli government smear campaign kicked off, using an interview with Najjar to bolster its claim that she was acting as a human shield for Hamas fighters.
أنا المسعفة رزان النجار أنا هنا على خطوط التماس أشكل درع بشري.
Right, so the Israelis put that out, a video of the young woman saying, "My name is Razan al-Najjar, I am a human shield." That's what the Israelis put out, right? But it's a lie. It's a monumental lie, as Dan Cohen explains in the next part of the clip.
But the Israeli government's video is deceptively edited. Here is the original version that shows her whole sentence.
I am a medic. My name is Razan al-Najjar. I am here at the border as a human shield to protect and save the injured. I volunteered by myself. No one encouraged me to do it. I wanted to risk my life to help injured people.
This New York Times article repeats the Israeli government's claim, and not until the 20th paragraph reveals that the Israeli military's version was only a fragment of what Razan al-Najjar actually said. Israeli accusations that Palestinians use each other as human shields are the textbook definition of chutzpah, or audacity, given the overwhelming amount of documentation of Israeli soldiers' use of Palestinian civilians as human shields. According to the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, Israeli security forces have repeatedly used Palestinians in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip as human shields, ordering them to perform military tasks that risk their lives. This use of civilians is not an independent initiative by soldiers in the field, but the result of a decision made by senior military authorities.
Wonderful bit of reporting by Dan Cohen there. I've said this myself over the years. Historically, it is the Israelis that have used Palestinians as human shields, not the Palestinians using their own as human shields. It's one of the great lies of all time. And they repeat it all the time. Whether you're watching CNN, Sky, C-SPAN, whatever, BBC, you'll get some Israeli apologist, even an MP in this country saying, they used these people as human shields. It's a nonsense. The young woman clearly says that she sees herself as a human shield. She meant, what she was saying was, I'm here to shield the Palestinians at the fence who are being targeted. I'm here to shield them, to treat them, to tend to them. Then she went on to say categorically that she was there of her own volition, wasn't there because anybody told her to be there. She was a medic. But Israel is it's an insane basket case place, country, lunatics. You know, it's evil on a scale that's unimaginable to most people. The guy shot her in the chest, point blank. I've seen the footage of it. There's no mistaking that she's a woman. There's no mistaking that she's unarmed. There's no mistaking that she's coming there to tend to other people at the fence. Some nut job just went bang. Straight through the chest and out the back. Destroyed her. Beautiful, young, talented, obviously intelligent woman. Gone like that in the blink of an eye. So what they do then is they clear the soldier who did it. Then they put out a pack of lies and edited video, selectively edited to show that she's saying, well, I'm a human shield, when in fact she said nothing of the sort. Israel, they call it. Well, it's certainly hell for the Palestinians who have to live there. Israel, imagine it. On this day of all days, as I mentioned earlier on, Aaron Banks is getting it in the neck because of his meetings with the Russians. And the Russians are influencing this country. You couldn't find a member of parliament last week to stand up to name Razan al-Najjar and to absolutely condemn the Israeli government for standing over her murder and the murders of everybody else that have been killed in that country this year and every other year. It's incredible, huh? Unbelievable. Thanks to William, who sent me a tweet. Is that to do with the march in London yesterday? Is that a joke tweet? Apparently there was a naked bike ride going on in London at the same time as the alt-right, or at least a few hundred members of the alt-right were marching for Free Tommy. I have no idea if that's a joke or not. No idea at all. I say again because I've had a few tweets on it and I've had a couple of emails on it, disgruntled emails. You want free speech in the world so long as people agree with your opinions. That isn't free speech at all. I have the right to my opinion about Tommy, Christopher, Stephen, Yaxley, Lennon, whatever his name is. I have the right to that opinion. I also have the right to say, which I have said, that I would prefer that our prisons were reserved for violent criminals, murderers, rapists. I wasn't thrilled that this clown ended up in prison, but he was warned. Don't prejudice the trial that's going on. We're actually here putting these guys on trial. Don't risk a mistrial, because if you do it again, you're going to prison. Do you understand? Yes, I do. And lo and behold, he does it again. And then he pleads guilty to it, which his idiotic, dumb, thick as pig shit supporters can't get through their heads. He admitted to it. Right. Our hero, champion of free speech, said Geert Wilders. Go and fuck off. Champion of free speech. Tommy says what others won't say. I've been saying it for years. About these gangs. About radical Islam. And who's really behind it. How it was introduced to the Middle East. And by whom. And for what reason. Which thick as pig shit Tommy Robinson doesn't understand. Tommy Robinson is saying things that others won't say. Give me a break. That's it for Sunday View today. Leave you with that bombshell. Back, of course, tomorrow, Monday. I don't have time to play the Bashar al-Assad. I'll hold it over. And there are some interesting things in it. You don't have to wait for me to hear it. It's on dailymail.co.uk. Some interesting stuff in that interview that he did with the journalist Hala Jaber. She's Lebanese, British. She interviewed him. And a lot of people are unhappy with it, saying she should have challenged him more. But he says some interesting things. It's on the Daily Mail website, dailymail.co.uk. The heat is extraordinary in the studio, so I'm glad to be taking my leave of you. My leave of you, I'm glad to be taking. Enjoy Sunday. Look after yourselves and one another. And we'll do this tomorrow at 7 p.m. UK time. Thanks to Simon Stewart for all the work on the YouTube channel. Thank you to Simon. And thanks to Jean Ann for reminding me that Fraser Nelson is in fact the editor of The Spectator. I said he's a journalist for The Spectator earlier on. He is, but he also edits the paper, which is important as well. Going to leave you with some Shirley Bassey. I have no idea why, but we are. See you tomorrow at 7. Until then, bye from me. Bye now.